Hello, everyone. Welcome in and good morning. I am super excited to be with you guys today. I want to thank SANS for Jean-Francois for hosting and bringing us in here to this excellent event. So why are we here today? I want to tell you a little story. I started off kind of like a hobby project, creating this tool called PurpleCloud. And now I start to use it professionally. And my hope here is the takeaway is that you all will be able to use this practically within your organizations. Take this back and use it. I'm really excited because I'm releasing a new version of the tool. This is version 1.1. I released it 1 week ago. And I'm going to do a live demo today. We're going to have some fun. I have 8 simulators. PurpleCloud creates 8 simulator labs. And I'm going to do 5 of these labs to show you guys how easy and fun it is to create these and how flexible they are. A couple of things about me. I'm a really big fan of giving back to the open source community and creating open source tools. A couple of the tools that I've created over time here, VoIP hoppers and network penetration testing tool. It's actually still relevant today. It was created in 2006 and it's still included in Kali Linux. It's really good for network enterprise pen testing. And then my brand new tool that I created is called Cloud Edge. As some of you guys use recon tooling, it's a tool that finds subdomain enumeration, does certificate transparency lookups, but the novel approach it has is it loads in all the IP addresses of the cloud providers, and it does reverse lookups of those IPs at cloud scale. So Cloud Edge is coded in Golang. It's very performant. But the other thing that I do is to tell you guys my day job. My day job is I work for SANS Institute in a unit called SROC. And I'm on the cloud engineering team. And what we do is we work with Terraform and we work with the SANS course authors and we build the cyber ranges for the classes. So my day job is kind of as a developer, and I'm going to have my hat on that's unique today because I'm in offensive operations doing pen testing and red teaming, but I'm also building out these cyber ranges. So what I want to do is tie in how we can parlay that into enterprise pen testing with cloud identity, and we can do purple teaming with that. So we're going to talk about on-premise purple teaming, and then we're going to pivot into cloud hybrid identity pen testing. So to start off, we need to talk about an introduction to infrastructure as code. So what is infrastructure as code? It's like basically this. For the cloud use case where you're logging into the admin console and you're hitting all these buttons manually, instead of doing that, you can have code that you push a button and it automatically creates all those cloud resources in whatever cloud provider it is. So that saves a lot of efficiency and time and repeatability. And then you store your code in a VCS, a version control system, and it's really nice and easy, and you can push those changes out. And whenever you want to make changes to your infrastructure, you just make change to the code and you do an apply, and it automatically pushes out those changes. So there's a lot of growing new use cases for security around infrastructure as code, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. There's a tool called Terraform, which is a universal tool that's very popular for this. Terraform is a CLI, but what I'm going to talk about is Terraform is kind of unwieldy. It has its own programming language called HCL, HashiCorp Configuration Language. So my tool has basically done the heavy lifting for you, and it's a generator for Terraform code. We'll do a demonstration and show you guys this. Pulumi is another universal tool. I've been talking to a lot of SANS instructors. They really like Pulumi because you can use your own programming language. Let's say you like Python. You can use Python, integrate in the Pulumi SDK, and then automatically push out those infrastructure changes. Security as code is a new growing idea around basically being able to automate doing security abuse stories. For example, I work with a company, I've worked with a couple of customers that are creating software, and you know, like in Jira, how you have user stories where it's like a feature of the software. Well, you can flip that on its side and you can have security abuse stories where you define a threat model for what the attacks are. And you say, an attacker cannot attack session state. An attacker cannot crack my JSON web token. And you put that into your Jira. And then every time you release a new version of the software, you have security unit testing that negates the actual attack happening. So there's a lot of growing things on this where we can use security as code. And some of these ideas here are, this is an excellent book. by Tanya Jonka, Purple Teaming Application Security. I've read this cover to cover. And then Agile Application Security really ties into this idea. When companies are making software, it's securing the pipeline, but also securing the application within the pipeline. So Purple Teaming is why we're here, but we're going to be shifting to the right and looking at new future use cases for attacking cloud identity. Like we're going to be talking about, blue team and red team working together in collaboration to make the security program better. And then we want to enrich the logs. We want to find process improvements, maybe in the detection engineering, where we want to overhaul detection engineering so it does a better job. We want to use Purple Teaming to train the blue team and get better to better instrument our logs and enrich our logs. Giorgio Quiles is a SANS instructor. He's done fantastic work in this area with Purple Teaming. He has some really good reference blogs right here. One of the other projects that George created is called Atomic Purple Team Framework. It's an open source tool, and I've used it to great success within companies. One time I was a CISO for a company, went in and took our SOC and said, we can turn this into a Purple Team. We had a team that was doing simulations. We put into Jira the Atomic Purple Team Framework for each attack simulation. And then we sat down with the CISO, we sat down with the CIO, and they loved it because we were able to show measurable improvements within the program with Atomic Purple Team Framework. So now we're getting into the labs. Let's talk about the simulation labs. Why do we want to do these simulation labs? There's a ton of reasons. We can't attack what we don't have access to. We can't attack what we don't have access to. So if you're doing a red team, what if you don't even have access to the production network yet? You want to create a simulation lab really, really quick on the fly to simulate what the customer has. Or maybe you're in the middle of a red team and it's an Azure AD customer and you find a certain scenario and you're blocked. So you can spin up this lab with Azure AD and you can simulate a Azure AD tenant exactly like that customer and then attack it. So there's a lot of reasons for this. There's bug bounty research. And if you look at, we're going to be talking about Microsoft. Microsoft has a really, really generous bug bounty program. And if you go down here and you look at cloud identity, which is what these labs create, you can earn yourself up to $100,000 with cloud identity with Microsoft. So it's pretty nice and interesting. You can take a look at that, Microsoft identity. Lots of reasons for this. Now I'm going to give you a couple of ideas on things you can take back to your company. Now, my day job is doing Terraform and doing this quote unquote cyber range, which I kind of cringe at. I like to use this new simulation labs. But a lot of companies are doing this where they have an on-premise environment, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit. How do you bypass an EDR or endpoint protection? How do you simulate the adversary tradecraft and behaviors? You can do that with these simulation labs. So we have 3 basic labs that I've extensively tested and played around with. I'm going to overview them really quick. Detection Lab is one of my favorites. It's been around for a long time. It's very solid. So Detection Lab has Splunk, Velociraptor, OS Query with Fleet, Sysmon. It's basically logging best practices. It's really, really good for single host detection engineering to test bypassing an EDR. Splunk Attack Range is very similar. It's made by the Splunk guys. It uses Splunk and Sysmon, but it has remote orchestrators that you can, using Python, you can remotely run attacks and it will run Atomic Red Team simulations. Now, a DAS is where things get interesting because now we start to move into multi-host Active Directory with our detection engineering. A DAS is basically similar to Detection Lab and Splunk, except it uses Elk Stack instead of Splunk, but it has multi-host domain join. Now you're talking about attacking a real enterprise Active Directory environment, right? How many of the companies that you work with only have a single host and it's not joined to Active Directory? Not a lot of people, right? Most companies have a large environment and they're joined to Active Directory. That's why this is valuable. Ghost is very interesting. Ghost is a user simulation framework. Now, if you're doing adversary simulations, you want to simulate a realistic environment. Ghost creates NPCs, non-player characters, it creates static background noise of real users. Because you don't want to be attacking an environment that doesn't have any users in it, right? If you're running a simulation, you can use this for training, and it has JSON files that basically programmatically create user behavior. These users are logging into email, they're sending emails, they're checking SMB shares, they're downloading files with their browser. You can simulate all of this behavior and it generates logs for you. That way you're attacking a real environment. It's created by the Carnegie Mellon University Software Institute. And so it's a great tool. It has a Grafana dashboard. And so you can add it into the mix, into your use case here. So what we want to do is look at the on-premise environment and what you're doing here. So you can add ghosts in. You can have your SIM with your blue team. You can add one of these simulation labs. Then you run your simulation tools, and it's more of a realistic enterprise environment. Now we get to the tools that I've created. Let's start to have some fun with this. So let's start to distinguish between what these different focus and objectives of these are. So we have detection lab in here. We have Splunk attack range. And then we have a DAS in the middle, because the old way of doing things here with detection engineering is it's a single host focus. But to do a real multi-host AD lab focus, then you're capturing the real enterprise behavior of an environment, where you can do lateral movement, where you can do pass the hash, where you can extract NT hashes out of LSAS memory and then use that to pivot within the environment. So that's where PurpleCloud comes in here. My tool, PurpleCloud, is a multi-host AD, but it even goes further out here because it talks about enterprise identity. See, PurpleCloud is a lab generator for an identity simulation lab, hybrid identity. So it does some of the old stuff here, but it also moves us into the future, because so many customers are now starting to move into the cloud. They're starting to do hybrid, where they have some on-premise and then some in the cloud, and then they're synchronizing their identity into the cloud. So that's what this is going to do. So the story here is how I got started with this. A long time, this is over 2 years ago, I started off with a hunting elk that I put in Azure as Azure VMs. And it was kind of to see what detection lab didn't have that capability at the time. Then I added in Velociraptor, and I had a separate cyber range that was just Velociraptor, and it automatically instrumented that. Then PurpleCloud combined together the Velociraptor and Helk, and it had some Windows endpoints for detection engineering. Then PurpleCloud is an Azure-focused lab that takes what PurpleCloud has, but it goes further. So this is PurpleCloud. It supports both AWS and Azure. It's a Terraform project. You can use it for detection engineering for single host attack simulations. It has logging best practices. It has Atomic Red Team and Elastic Detection Rita and APT Simulator. And it will automatically ship sysmon logs into the hunting elk instance. And it also configures Velociraptor. So that's PurpleCloud. You can check it out. But we're going to be talking about PurpleCloud. So PurpleCloud is Azure-focused simulation lab. So this is the website for it, purplecloud.net, where you can check it out. I updated it a week ago, and this is all the code I'm going to demonstrate to you now in this live demo is what you can go play with right now. There's no magic here of something that I have some hidden demo. You can all do this right now. I'm going to show you how easy this is to do. Now, why is PurpleCloud different? Because unlike some of the other tools out there that are just Terraform templates, PurpleCloud generates Terraform templates. It's a Terraform code generator. It's basically a set of different Python scripts, and the Python scripts generate Terraform code, making it so easy for you. It's a lab built for exploring, bug bounty research, red teams, blue teams to do security research and simulations. You can use it for bug bounty. You can use it to mix and match the different use cases, kind of like Metasploit framework, where you can mix and match exploits and payloads. You can mix and match the different generators because they're decoupled from each other, and you can use it to create your own enterprise environment. So once I start talking about the 8 generators, you might get some ideas about how you could take this back to your company. PurpleCloud is not a guided, structured vulnerability lab. There's a lot of tools that are kind of exploding where it'll have guided vulnerabilities. This doesn't have vulnerabilities built into it except for one use case, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. It does have one guided privilege escalation lab. So here's the generators. We have 8 generators we can play around with. I'm going to do a demonstration here in a second. I'm going to start to create some of them and show you how easy it is. We have an Active Directory generator, ad.py. This creates a realistic enterprise lab if you want to learn Active Directory, or if you want to do attack simulations against domain join hosts. This is the generator for you. It's a first of its kind Azure Active Directory lab. It'll spin up your own Azure AD lab within your tenant. Azure Sentinel. Now we're getting into cloud native SIEM, cloud native attacks. It'll create an Azure Sentinel lab for you. You can spin it up and destroy it whenever you're done. It has a malicious application consent phishing lab. If you're doing a red team and you want to generate an application that has all the application consent permissions built into it, it has that for you. The newest generators here, ADFS and Azure AD join. So ADFS is Hybrid Identity Federation Lab. It auto creates that. And it has an Azure AD join where it will join Windows 10 VMs to Azure Active Directory. It has a managed identity and then an Azure Storage Lab. So this is how easy it is to run. You go into the generators directory of whatever your use case is, and you do Python adfs.py, and then you run Terraform, and Terraform will push the changes out. So let's go ahead and jump in and start this little simulation here. So let's go into, we're going to do ADFS here at the top. I'm going to do 5 of these here. So I'll show you guys how easy this is. I go in here to the tool usage, and these are the 8 generators right here. I go down to ADFS, and I say, I want to do an ADFS server here with a self-signed certificate. Okay, you can actually do more than that, but this is just a really simple use case. So I do Python 3 ADFS, and it created the Terraform files. Then I do Terraform apply. Right here. So that's ADFS. We're going to let it run, and then you'll see when it finishes, we'll look at what it's created. The second one we're going to do is the Azure AD join, which is a brand new lab I just created about a week ago. So let's go to the examples here. Let's do a basic Azure AD join, creating one Windows 10 endpoint. You can create as many as you want here. So we're going to do this one. We're going to go into Azure AD join. We're going to create a one Windows 10 endpoint joined, and then we're going to do Terraform apply. So you can take these Terraform files and copy them off and customize them as you want. This just generates the Terraform files. So you're free to, you don't have to use the Python scripts, but now you have the Terraform files and you can do what you wish with them. Now, the third one we're going to do is we're going to do Azure Sentinel. So we're going to go into Sentinel, and we're going to generate an Azure Sentinel lab. And this one is really powerful because it creates an enterprise Active Directory environment with full domain join and auto logged on domain users. So right here, I'm going to randomly generate 500 users. So let's grab that one. And I'm going to do domain join, but I'm also going to do auto log on users. So what this does is it randomly selects an Active Directory user and logs them in as if they're sitting at the console. And so you're doing really realistic attack simulations. So I'm going to do endpoints 1. This is going to generate 500 AD users. I'm going to take out my hard-coded easy password, so it'll auto-generate a secure password. And I'm going to change the Azure location to be West US, okay? Dash. Okay, so now it's using a Python library to generate 500 AD users, and it automatically pushes that into Active Directory with OUs and AD groups as well. Now, Azure Active Directory. Okay, here we go. We created that. Now let's do Terraform apply. Auto approve. So you see, these are independent and decoupled from each other. They randomly generate Azure resource names that don't conflict with each other. So that way you don't have to worry that like there's going to be a naming clash. You can mix and match these as you see fit. Now here's an Azure Active Directory. Now with this is where our guided exploitation scenario is that we created. Actually, Aaron Cure, if any of you guys are taking 588, he's a cloud penetration instructor. He's in the room. Aaron and I did a workshop and we created this together where we do a Azure Active Directory privilege escalation scenario. So this one down here is right here, a service principal abuse scenario. I'm going to grab that and then I'm going to generate the Terraform for that. And then I'm going to do Terraform apply. So this automatically creates a vulnerable scenario with an application administrator, what's called a PRA, which we can talk about. And you can see it in the workshop if you want to do that. Now, the fifth and final generator I'm going to do here is an application consent attack. And this is in the phishing app generator right here. I do the phishing app right here, PY, and it automatically creates an application consent scenario for us. And I do Terraform apply, and you see how easy and fast this is. So it's created an attack application in my home tenant, and I can use it to phish other users. So you see how fast some of these have already, the Azure AD Lab was super fast. These ones are still building because they're creating Azure VMs. Now I'm going to go back to the slides and let's talk about each one of these generators, okay? So Azure Active Directory, let's talk about the features and capabilities. This one is a first of its kind Azure Active Directory lab that you can use to create your own PenTest lab for Azure AD. You can specify as many users as you want with a count variable. It creates Azure AD applications, it creates groups and service principals. This is a screenshot of what this looks like here. We've created 1,000 users here. We've specified a UPN suffix, and it outputs file names that are very useful. It outputs all the Azure users to a file. You can use that as input to your attack tools. Let's say you want to do password spraying or some reconnaissance. You can use that here to test outside-in type attacks against your Azure tenant. This is what it looks like. It auto-generates these fake users, and it auto-assigns them in Terraform randomly into these different groups. Then we have service principal abuse attack scenario. This is a privilege escalation scenario. And the final slide will show you the workshop where you can do this on your own. We have a 2-hour excellent workshop. You can download a VM, and it gives you a playbook on how to manually run a privilege escalation attack within your own Azure AD tenant. Now what I want to talk about is threat modeling these attacker techniques with a new attack matrix created by Microsoft researchers called the Azure Threat Research Matrix. What this tool allows you to do is now you can threat model with a pen test, and you can go to your customer and you can start to practice these techniques against PurpleCloud. You can spin up your own scenario and then run these simulations. This is the Azure Threat Research Matrix. So first off, they have a password spray one. What I'm showing you here is I did a password spray against my own tenant. I did this last night, and I generated 300 users, and I did a password spray, and I was able to crack all the users and not get locked out by Microsoft. See, we have the golden day of hacking. When you had Exchange Web Services, you were able to effectively do password spraying all day long. Azure started having a security controls feature called Smart Lockout, where they start invalidating your results. So then we play this game where we can rotate our IP addresses, and we can use the power of the cloud and the infinite network capabilities to use Amazon API Gateway to rotate our IP addresses. And this is something we go in deep in the cloud pen testing class. We have a whole day on this, on using the cloud to carry out our pen testing, how we can obfuscate our tracks. The interesting thing about this is you can actually detect this attack because AWS publishes all their API gateway IP addresses. You can look up the IP and you could programmatically block the IP addresses of Amazon API gateway when they're trying to do a password spray, right? I haven't seen this yet implemented into Microsoft Azure, but this is something you could do with your own web application firewall. You could implement in this, and here's some insights into that. You can look for Amazon API gateway, and you can detect when you're getting password sprayed using API gateway. Here's like a look at this from last night. We can go and look at our Azure in the tenant. I did this spray last night. Let's look at our sign-in logs. And so now you can do this with PurpleCloud. You can spin up, a range of 300 users, and look here, all these IP addresses here: Paris, France, Brazil, Stockholm, and failure, and then we have, success. So this is what we can do with PurpleCloud. Now we can automatically spin up a Microsoft Sentinel, and we can look at the sign-in logs, and we can map those attacks into the Azure Threat Research Matrix. This is the privilege escalation abuse scenario. We have service principal abuse primitives. We can simulate this with the Azure AD simulator. Then you can do detection engineering with Sentinel. You can have sample KQL. You can automate all this stuff. You spin up the lab, you run the attack, and then you can do the lookup and instrument your logs with a cloud-native SIM. You can even, if you're AWS, you can stream that into AWS LogTrail, CloudTrail. And this is an example of one of the tools that we're looking at. So here is the on-premise Active Directory simulator. This is called ad.py. It'll generate a domain controller. It'll generate as many AD endpoints, as many Windows 10 endpoints as you want here, endpoints too. It'll domain join the endpoints. And you can even import in your own list of users. That's right, it'll import in a CSV file. You have to have it in the right format, but that's something that a lot of the tools don't do. It can randomly generate users, but you can also import in your own users programmatically. So it's a new feature. It imports in from CSV. It'll automatically create OUs and AD groups. It'll do domain join. The most powerful feature here is it auto logs in the domain users. So then you're extracting credentials out of memory. You're doing lateral movement. So it's a great lab for practicing Active Directory. Here's what it looks like in action. It created some users here. You can use this within your own organization and take this back today. If you want to do attack simulations, it places the users into OUs and AD groups automatically. Each Windows 10 endpoint has its own Terraform file. This is really nice because instead of using the Terraform modules interface, you can generate Terraform and then customize it afterwards. It's really, really easy and nice to do that. And this is kind of a look at what it looks like inside of Azure. It's created 3 Windows 10, 1 domain controller. All of that was automated. This is a look inside of the Active Directory snap-in. We got 3 Windows 10 domain join and a bunch of users. This is what I was mentioning with the auto log on domain users. You ever done a pen test and it says so-and-so's logged in, right? So then you do PowerShell remoting maybe to get in because you don't want to RDP in, but that user is logged in with their domain user credentials. So we're attacking that, and that's what some of the other labs aren't doing. This is a level of realism that's one notch above. The passwords default to strong, but you can set your own password if you want. But by default, it's going to auto-generate a strong password. And then finally, it uses hunting elk as a SIM, and it instruments Velociraptor. So if you want to just do a single host detection engineering lab, you can spin up 1 endpoint with hunting elk and not do the domain join. And that's going to get you kind of what detection lab does. So there's a lot of flexibility in this. You can use it for different use cases. I just added a Sysmon version 14 to this. You can upgrade it yourself. I'll show you how. It's really, really easy. You can add in your own XML files for Sysmon. So you can really use it to customize. Let's take a look and see how we're doing here. So yeah, this one finished, and then the AD one is still running here. So this is hunting elk that's instrumented in this. And then Velociraptor. So you can use this as a hybrid identity lab. You can mix and match these generators. It will drop Azure AD Connect onto the domain controller's desktop. That makes it so easy and nice to automate doing security research into this. I'll say it again, it'll drop Azure AD Connect onto DC's desktop. So you just double click on it and you can bridge your identity between on-premise and Azure AD. It'll synchronize that. Because what you do is you create the AD generator and then you create Azure AD generator and then you bring them together. This is the Sentinel generator. You run it, sentinel.py. It has all the features of the AD generator. It just ships the logs automatically into a Microsoft Sentinel log analytics workspace. It implements Sysmon. It will do Windows security event logs, and all of that will go in. And it's a really nice one. If you don't want to do an on-premise SIEM, you want to do a cloud native SIEM, you can ship your logs that way and then map your attacks to the Azure Threat Research Matrix. Here's an example. A new feature is it'll auto download PurpleSharp. I just added PurpleSharp. So you can do simulations with PurpleSharp. It drops it into C:/tools. You run PurpleSharp, and then it'll ship those logs into Azure Sentinel. So the consent phishing this is something that'll auto create a malicious Azure AD app for application consent phishing. And it already did this for us here in this generator over here. And what you would do is you would go in to your phishing tool and you would just add the client ID and the client secret that was generated here. And you just add that in. And then you can run your phishing campaign. It's that easy. This automates that. In the cloud penetration testing class, we go super deep into this, but this will automate standing up that malicious app. So like I said, we're mapping these attacks into the Azure Threat Research Matrix, right? Now we have a tool that we can use to create a simulation lab and automate running that simulation, and then look at our logs and look at our blue team and make sure everyone's trained to catch this. This is the malicious application consent. This is what it looks like. And then you can pull the KQL logs, the audit logs, you can catch when a user gets phished using this. It has a managed identity lab. These are special user-assigned identities that are roles. They're attached into a VM. There's been a lot of research on this on attack surface around managed identities. It'll create a user-assigned identity, and you can actually steal this as an attacker, and then you can log in as that service principal, as that application identity. And so it's mapped into the Azure Threat Research Matrix. This is a kind of an exploit example of what it looks like. You can automate this, and then you can look and see if your logs properly detect this attack. And then we have the storage lab generator. It generates vulnerable storage. You can test it for leaking out sensitive data via Azure storage. There was an incident with Microsoft just recently where they leaked 2.7 terabytes of customer data. They made a mistake through this. You can simulate this yourself. It'll upload sensitive files. You can scan and trigger this vulnerability here. And the final two generators are Federation Lab. It creates a hybrid identity federation lab. It'll create a domain controller, it'll create an ADFS server, and it'll join that, and then you can use that to do simulations. And then it creates a Sentinel, and it ships logs from ADFS into Sentinel with the security audit logs, best practices enabled. So this is what the KQL looks like here, and we're mapping that in and running simulations. You can practice the golden SAML. You can extract out a token signing certificate. This happened with the SolarWinds incident. This technique was used. And instead of going through the front door, they went to the on-premise and they were able to generate SAML tokens in order to log in and bypass the ADFS server. So we look at the KQL logs for the ADFS audit logs. So Azure AD join is the final generator, and it'll generate Windows 10 endpoints that are joined to Active Directory. And you can do a lot of research around PRT, primary refresh tokens, Intune, and some of the attacks with Azure Active Directory users that are able to log into VMs. So this is kind of wrapping it up here. We have, that was kind of a quick look at the generators. We have 8 generators. You can mix and match them. Hopefully, you can take this back and be like, now I have some ideas of how I could use this. The slides are going to be posted out there. We can use this to simulate attacker behavior with cloud native. If we want to go deep into this, we'd probably have to spend 3 days going super deep into this. These are broad strokes, right? I'm just showing you guys kind of an overview of the features and capabilities. So we'll wrap it up here in a second. This is the demo. I think we got like 2 minutes. Yeah, so I pretty much got to wrap it up. But the demo here was to show how easy it was to generate these. Look at this. The generator already ran, and the Terraform outputs showed you the systems that were created, the credentials on the systems. You type Terraform output, and you have all the stuff right there. That's very nice. It will auto do Azure NSG security groups. What I mean here is that it auto protects by default your systems. It'll detect your public IP address, and it automatically whitelisted this source IP of where I was connecting from here at the hotel. If you change locations, you just do Terraform apply. It'll automatically update those NSGs. So you're not making this wide open. You're doing it whitelisted. So that's pretty much a wrap on this. This is the workshop I wanted to tell you guys about. We have Moses is the 588 author in the room, but Aaron, if you want to raise your hand, Aaron is teaching 588 this week. Aaron and I created this workshop, and you guys can grab the workbook and you can run through the attack simulation yourself, create your own Azure AD PenTest lab using Terraform, PurpleCloud, and then run this guided exploitation scenario. So that's a wrap, and thank you guys for joining this.